So before I really begin this talk, I'd like to take a walk down memory lane. Back to the 1960s. We were in the midst of the Cold War and at the height of the most definitive competition of the 20th century, the space race. It was the US versus the Soviet Union, each one wanting to be the first country to put a man on the moon. And this race was so cutthroat in every aspect that it led to a very us versus them mentality. Whatever new, cool information you discovered, you kept that to yourself, because you wanted your country to have the advantage. You wanted to win. So we see, at the end, the US won. We put the first man on the moon, as you can see by the lovely American flag. But because this goal was so defined and so specific, that once we achieved this, it was really big, and then we just kind of stopped. We still sent up manned missions. We still explored. We just didn't do all the things we had hyped ourselves up to do. We didn't go to Mars. We didn't go to Pluto. We didn't send people outside of the solar system. We entered a period of stagnation. And in this period of stagnation, space became a business. And it was with this change that the timeline of the space industry changed. Following NASA's 1960s timeline and the decades following, it might have been our grandchildren's grandchildren that got to walk on the moon again because of all of the red tape. But Elon Musk says it'll be 2035. And he's not just talking about going back to the moon, he's talking about Mars and establishing a colony. So I just told you that we haven't sent any more people to other planets in about 50 years. Now he's talking about moving an entire society to another planet in under 16? That's a pretty lofty goal. How are we going to achieve this? Well, to reach another planet, we must work as a planet. So right now, we're in Space Race 2.0. This time, it's a global challenge, but it's also a cooperative race. I can explain. So the last space race was country versus country. Now, it's company versus company. And there are a few things associated with this. So companies can have wildly different goals. For example, SpaceX wants a colony, whereas NASA, I know, not technically a company, but NASA wants to explore and learn everything they can. So these goals are not mutually exclusive. You can have a win-win situation in this space race. So this scenario is inspiring companies to work together so that they can both achieve their goals faster and more efficiently. But everybody loves to brag. Everybody loves to say that I was number one and that they were the best. Companies are no different, because for companies, being number one means more customers. So it's the desire of these companies that even though their goals might be different, they still want that title of being the first company in space, being the first company to establish themselves in space that's spurring the innovation that's keeping this race going. So another thing about this race, now that it's a global race, the people working there have changed. It is no longer your clean-cut military man with the short sleeve button-up and the pocket protector. Yeah, it's not him anymore. Instead, it's a group of people, somewhat insultingly sometimes, referred to as the internet generation. This is mainly from the fact that we're always scrolling through our phones, always reading some article. But for the space race, being the internet generation is a huge advantage, because the internet gives us access to everything. There's nothing I can't learn without a few minutes of Googling. So on the internet, you can find a lot of information. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it you really wish you hadn't read. But you can also find a lot of information in general, right? So one fact that you might be able to find with a few minutes of Googling is that the only member of the band ZZ Top to not have the signature beard, his name is Frank Beard. You might not find this as hilarious as I do or as ironic, but I think we can both agree with the fact that this knowledge, while it's cool, is pretty useless. It might be good as a conversation starter, or at trivia night, might score you that win. But you're not going to be You're not going to succeed or not succeed because you know this fact. But the internet can also give you a lot of useful information, such as cold welding. So cold welding is this phenomenon that happens in a vacuum, where you hold two pieces of the same metal really close together. And bear with me, the atoms have no more reason to believe that they are separate pieces, and they fuse. It's pretty cool. It's also really practical. So whenever I come home, from a long day at school, I'm all stressed because I have a big project, and of course I waited too long to start it. I always ask my mom, like, oh, I'm stressed, and she goes, Abby, how do you eat an elephant? I'm like, I don't know, Mom, I'm kind of stressed. Just one bite at a time. So let's back up a little bit. Let's say we want to make another International Space Station, International Space Station 2.0. So without this knowledge and without the cold welding phenomenon, we may have just built the whole thing on Earth and then tried to lift it in one giant launch to orbit. That's not going to work, because space stations are very large. That's a lot of rockets. It's unrealistic. But if we break that space station down into little bite-sized pieces and launch each bite-sized piece up and then assemble it using this phenomenon of cold welding in space, all of a sudden this becomes a lot more realistic. So one more thing, the internet gives us access to people. So in the 60s, you had a lot of barriers of isolationism. Your countries were competing, or there was a whole ocean in the way. But now, with the internet, I don't have to worry about hopping on a plane to go to Japan to discuss a research paper I found, or go to Thailand and discuss that and pay all that money to get on the plane. Now I can just send an email. So this is establishing a lot more channels of communication than we had before, and this leads to a greater influx of new ideas into the great human pool of knowledge. But one more thing about this race. In the last space race, we progressed in giant leaps, much like Neil Armstrong's one giant leap for mankind. But now we're doing it more in baby steps. For example, the Google Lunar X competition. It ended last year, unfortunately with no winner due to logistics. But the premise of the competition was that you get a team together, you build a rover, you send it to the moon, and it sends back video. I know what you're thinking, how is that progress? We've already been to the moon. But countries went to the moon with all of the resources a national space agency has. But now we're talking about a group of buddies with a weekend off doing it, accomplishing the same feat. Another example is robotics. So in the 60s, if you had told someone, hey, yeah, your surgery, it's going to be done by a robot. No, don't worry, it's no biggie, you'll be fine. They would have freaked out. That's a big thing for them. But now, you tell someone, hey, yeah, your surgery is going to be done by a robot. They go, okay, cool. We're now so comfortable with robotics, it has progressed so much that we're willing to trust it with our life. So the main thing about the space race being in baby steps this time versus giant leaps, it offers a lot more opportunity for someone to step in and go, hey, I have an idea. Before, you had to jump in like right as you saw Sputnik across the sky. You had to go, hey, I want to work on the man in orbit. But now you have so many more opportunities, and this leads to increased innovation. And this increased innovation leads to a better end product. So what are all of these baby steps leading to? The last space race brought us the water purifier, the handheld vacuum cleaner, even with all of the barriers I've mentioned. So now that we don't have those barriers, what can we accomplish? Well, for starters, we're asking new questions. So the trip to Mars is about 7 months. That's a long time for your body to be exposed to that kind of radiation. So before we send someone, logically we need to do some more research on how radiation affects cells. In that research, we might be able to better understand that relationship between radiation and cells, and possibly develop a better treatment for diseases such as cancer. In addition, polymers. So polymers really boomed in World War II, and by the 60s it had died down a little, but not much. It was still a really big thing. But now, high school students make a polymer for their science fair project. And sometimes it's not even their project, it's just a medium for them to experiment on. That's amazing. We've come so far that what was huge and something a doctoral candidate would do is now done by a high school student in that 1-hour research class. But also, this is slightly off topic too, but supernovas. We understand the basics of what happens during a supernova, the most basic of reactions, but we don't understand the nitty-gritty. We don't understand exactly what those atoms are doing. So with this space race, we might be able to get a little closer. Not too close, because it is a giant explosion and we don't want to die, but just a little bit closer. And we might be able to understand the secret of fusion energy. That would provide clean energy for Earth and whatever planets we inhabit by then. So overall, these baby steps can lead us to a lot more places. So now that we're working as a planet to reach another planet, we have a few new goals. First off, we're moving past the moon. We've been there, we've done that. Now we're on to Mars. And not just, taking the first few steps and planting the flag and then going back home. We're going to establish a society there, a colony. So soon, space will become a reality for regular people. You won't have to have a fancy degree in something you probably can't pronounce or a military clearance higher than the president's. For example, a billionaire, a very lucky guy, just bought 6 to 8 tickets to the moon. Who's he taking with him? You might think researchers, developers, trying to get ahead of the game, trying to get an advantage. No, he's taking artists, people who draw, who write, who create, because he wants to bring that human touch to space that will be there when we have a space society. But in order to really achieve this space society, we have to actually work together. We have to work as a team. This means we can't be a dysfunctional team. So the space industry, as wonderful as it is not that kind to the environment. It kind of dumps enormous amounts of toxic waste into the oceans. So understandably, environmentalists are not happy about this fact. We're basically undoing everything they're doing. So in order to really achieve this goal of a space society, that ideal society we're aiming for, we have to reach a compromise with them. Go, hey, yeah, we're going to continue progressing, but we're going to do it in a more environmentally sustainable way, such as reusable rockets. It greatly cuts down on the amount of toxic waste being dumped into the oceans. So environmentalists are happy, we're working as a better team. A better team which will allow us to do more things. So I've told you a lot about Space Race 2.0. A lot of grand ideas, a lot of new goals, but now I'm going to tell you about Space Race 2.0 Oser. That's me, by the way. So I don't want to be just a passerby in this space race. I don't want to let it fly by like the ISS every night. I want to work on the Mars missions. So some of you might recognize this rover. This is Opportunity. Opportunity recently died. I'm not going to lie, I cried too. There's a lot of tears, a lot of waterworks. But after I finished crying, I started researching. And so what killed Opportunity is there was a dust storm, and it went through the wheels and attacked the delicate sensors on the rover's body. So I designed, I'm not going to lie, it's a hubcap. It's a really fancy scientific hubcap that can be put on these rovers that can stop this from happening in the future. But my solution's not perfect, I'm not going to lie to you. But all that's really needed for innovation is that first step, that first idea that everyone then launches off of, and your end result is so much better. So I may just be one person, but I want to do my part to work as a planet to reach another planet. Thank you.